Ah. Ah. Oh, it's good and loud too. Actually, it's a bit loud. Is it possible to... I very rarely ask people to turn the microphone down. Is there... I don't know who's in charge of the desk. Oh, could you turn... Oh, no, that's good. That's good. Thank you. I'm sorry, this is probably the most dysfunctional time of opening a session that we've ever known. So be thrilled that you're involved in it. Okay. I can manage with, yeah.
Well, I do apologise. I seem to have managed to create unutterable chaos since being here. I have managed to lose everything. First of all, I lose my coat, which has the car keys in. But Richard very kindly lends me his keys. So I go back to the house to see if they're there. I come out of the house with the keys, put them down somewhere and lose them. So now I can't get into the car where our folders are so that we can do an evening for you. All is well. Finally found my coat, found Richard's keys, found the car keys, found the folders, and now Adrian hasn't got his glasses. So at some point we'll find his glasses. He is now wearing mine. So I think this bodes well. I think this is going to be just a great evening.
Do you think God is with us? Who knows? I don't know. Can we turn this one up a tiny bit? Just a tiny bit. Thank you very much. Right. Well, I thought, as we've been in such chaos, one of the things that calms everybody and makes life a little easier is to hear a wonderful set of normal church notices. And I've so loved doing this over the years, because we are kind of Anglicans. I mean, we're Christians first, I hope, but we've also been in the Anglican area, I suppose, for most of our lives. And the notices always intrigue me. One of the best times was in the Channel Islands when there was a very grizzled old vicar, and it was Pentecost Sunday. And he said, there is only one notice: the charismatic prayer group, the existence of which has been known to me for 8 minutes, will not be meeting on Tuesday. There's a whole novel going on under that, isn't there? So this version of the notices came about because we were at a church in North Kent, and the vicar, I promise you, used these opening words, or the bit of these opening words when he did his notices. And after the service had finished, he came up to me and he said, "You're going to use that, aren't you?" And I said, yes I am. So this was the church notices that arose from that. Good morning. A few brief notices before our service commences. In the forthcoming week, Tuesday will be the 4th Tuesday in a month that has 5 Tuesdays. So, as is our normal practice, we shall be bringing the Wednesday meeting back to Monday and holding the Tuesday meeting on Friday. Please study these details carefully, as we wish to avoid the most unsatisfactory situation that occurred on the last occasion when Tuesday was the 4th Tuesday in a month of 5 Tuesdays, and a number of folk attended all 4 meetings in the hope that they might hit upon the right one by chance. Friends, I've been asked to remind everybody that the key to the side chapel is on a hook in the junction box just outside the vestry door. The key to the junction box is kept in the tall cupboard at the back of the church. And the key to the tall cupboard can be found in the robing chest, which is situated just outside the vestry door, immediately beneath the junction box. The key to the robing chest is held by Mr. Dumpney, who has kindly agreed to make it available for collection on the 1st and 3rd Mondays and the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of each month. On those months which actually commence on a Monday, the key will be available on the 1st Wednesday, the 2nd Friday, the 3rd Thursday, and the 4th Wednesday of that month. The side chapel has been rather underused of late. and we hope more folk will take advantage of this facility. May I ask, friends, that when the time comes for communion, that those occupying the left-hand side of the rearmost block of pews should make their way up the north aisle, through the door into the passage between the church and the hall, turn right, just outside the disabled toilet, proceed round behind the altar and approach the rail through the north door of the Lady Chapel. We had a most unfortunate incident last week when Mrs. Cardew-Fit, who is elderly and just a little bit confused, walked on out of the east door along the high street and lined up in the communion for the communion in the public bar of the Blue Cockatoo, with consequences that I can only describe as grotesque. So I know that's a slight exaggeration, but I love it when they go on and on and on and on and on, and everybody is bored. So, why laugh? Why laugh? I mean, when I started going to church, there wasn't a lot of laughter. But I have a disease, as some of you know well, and the disease is flippancy. Does anyone else here suffer from that disease? Somebody does, clearly.
I think somebody does.
And I know where it began. It was in school. I was at grammar school. And I was sitting next to a boy called Smith. And Smith was eating chocolate. And he gave me some chocolate. So we were both eating chocolate. And the teacher pointed in our general direction and said, "Are you eating, Smith?" And I said, "I never touched him, sir." See? And the faint ripple of amusement that passed through the class so pleased me that I started to become like that a bit more.
I always feel, even at this point, there's a sort of ripple of sympathy going towards me. And I want to share with you, I mean, having caused all the chaos this evening, I don't know how I can say that really, but Adrian does have an unusual mind. It is true. And I want to show you a demonstration of that. This is an honest conversation in our car. We were driving along, and sometimes there's a bit of a silence and you're just driving along. And one of you says to the other one, "What are you thinking about?" And I said that to Adrian, and this is the honest truth because I wrote it down immediately afterwards. He said, "Well, I was thinking about young shadow, the unconscious side of consciousness. And then I was asking myself about the illogicality of most thoughts about creation. Then I inwardly let out a silent cry of anguish over every damn thing. What else? Oh, yes. Then I suddenly thought how much I would love to have a really fresh dressed crab for supper. And finally, I sank into a deep gloom over the difficulty of finding anything near a half-decent radish nowadays." What? That's sort of multi-layered
Perfectly normal
oddness.
series of thoughts.
But one of the things you've been enjoying recently is just letting your mind, your unusual mind, play around with writing
That's
limericks.
right, limericks. Now, you know limericks. Limericks are where you say there was a young man from whatever or a young lady from whatever. And the smallest county in England is Rutland, and it's also one of the most beautiful. And it has a motto, Rutland, and it's multo in parvo. Does anyone know what that means? Because I didn't. It means a lot in a little, because it's a little tiny county, but it is really beautiful. And limericks are similar. They only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. So to get anything interesting or funny in them is really difficult, and I hadn't really understood that you have to work like mad to make this work. So I've had a go at some. So I'll read one. Have you got one ready to
Well,
read?
I have, because this is our dog Gracie, and she has promised to be incredibly good this evening, but who knows. But Adrian wrote one about heaven that I particularly like. "God, there's a question I've got. Here on earth, I've asked it a lot. I can't bear to part from the love of my heart, so is heaven dog-friendly or not?"
And it did occur to me that Adam and Eve need a little more attention than they get. So this is an Adam and Eve one. "On the day after God got so vexed, both Adam and Eve were perplexed. We gather we're nude, and it's terribly rude. but we've no idea what to do next.
Yes, well, there we are.
And one about Revelation. You know Revelation, of course. Revelation, I studied for hours and hours and hours, for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
Well, I bet that's helped.
I hope you did better than me.
One more?
One more, I could do one more, I suppose, yeah. So, well, Eutychus was a lad who went to listen to the Apostle Paul speak, if you remember, in the New Testament. And Paul, it was a very hot evening, I gather, this is all in the Bible. Eutychus fell asleep and actually fell out of the window to the ground, three floors down. And Paul, perhaps a bit embarrassed that he caused the death of a listener, of a member of the congregation, rushed down to bring him back to life. So putting that into a limerick was a little tricky, but it went like this. Eutychus and his unique memories. Paul, droning on as the temperature rose. Me, toppling backwards, lost in a doze. But weirdest of all, I woke under Paul, stretched out from my head to my toes. What a strange thing to happen. And after Paul had stretched himself out on this young man's body, which was a dead body, he was healed and he came back to life.
We've been talking a lot, Adrian and I, about the effect of the post-COVID period on churches, on individuals. And we've really realised that what happened, and it's a long time ago now, but it kind of shook us. It shook us out of the way we do things. We've thought about it a lot and thought it was almost like scaffolding that holds you together. You knew where you were. You knew what to do. And in a way, you knew what God was doing a little bit more clearly, or you thought you did. And then during that period, it was a bit of a wobble for a lot of people. Where was God? Where was this mighty God that sorted things out? And I think since then, we've realised that society has changed a lot, and the world is now swirling, isn't it? I don't know about how you feel, but we are surrounded by chaos. Chaos in the Far East, chaos in Ukraine, but chaos in all sorts of ways. And we're also subject to fake news, aren't we? Which makes us even more confused, really. People can have their own truth. And it all gets a bit tricky, really. And we're in danger. We're in danger of, well, you've kind of used the expression, maybe giving God a good reference, just sort of plastering over things, filling cracks. And we're in danger of pretending we're a little bit more, well, I can't pretend I'm anything this evening, having totally caused chaos, but we are sometimes in danger of feeling we should be presenting a little bit better than maybe we are.
I think the problem is that we only tell half-truths about Christian experience and things that happen to us. And because of the fear of being left behind, perhaps, or that you haven't really understood, you keep those problems and knots and difficulties inside you and don't really share them with people. One of the things that happened to me 40 years ago was that after having a breakdown, which was horrible, and those of you who've been through that will know it's horrible, I started writing honestly. And it's really dangerous for Christians to write honestly, isn't it? I mean, what could happen if you start doing that? But actually, it's had, for me, a releasing effect. And I think for some others, and I would really recommend telling the truth. Because whatever we laugh at, whoever we laugh at, whatever we laugh about, this Jesus, who is at the center of what we believe, I really love him. I love him. But a lot of the rest is crap. I use that word very carefully. But it is very dangerous to not be what you are and to be something else.
Having said that, I mean, actually, we're doing quite well at it.
We've cracked it.
I mean,
you,
we're
Bridget,
talking about other people, really. I mean, we're fine.
We've cracked it. Yeah, we've been married 54 years, and we now have really, I think, sorted marriage out. We now stop in the middle of arguments to have coffee. Now, I think that is a major step forward in marriage, don't you? Because you go, oh, blimey, let's have a coffee. Because you know who's going to win, don't you? So you might as well start. And by the time you get to the coffee, you've forgotten what you were arguing about anyway. But we're good friends, we're good mates, we are, after 54 years. And we're still stumbling, dragging, trying followers of Jesus. We're still there, and we're still doing that. But yes, we're doing well in another way. There's a book in the New Testament which really God should never have let in. I know he won't mind me saying that. It's the book of James, and it's all about terrible practical things that you've got to do instead of that nice theory that you get in the other bits. And right at the beginning of that book, it says, if you are experiencing difficulties, you should regard it as pure joy. How are you doing with that? How are you doing with that? So this is a typical morning in the Plass household.
Adrian, oh gosh, that's loud. Adrian?
Yes.
You'll never guess what.
Oh, what's that?
Well,
yeah.
The car won't start, and it looks as if the problem is going to be incredibly complex and unbelievably expensive.
Oh, fantastic.
I know.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. Oh, that's so wonderful.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Fancy that happening on a morning when, the electricity has gone in the house and we've no way of getting it sorted out. Oh, it's just amazing. Hey, and did you know the ceiling in the living room, the water's coming through. It's coming through. I must say, I got to say, I consider all these things as pure joy.
Oh, yes. It is the most wonderful opportunity for us to practice perseverance through the testing of our faith.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, yes, indeed. I should think we'll be about as complete and mature as it's possible to be after this little lot.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, we'll just ask God to help us deal with everything, won't we?
Oh, yes, of course we will, because he'll give generously without finding fault. The Bible says so, yes.
And we won't doubt.
You're joking.
Doubt us.
We're not going to doubt, are we?
No, of course we're not.
We've never been like that, ever.
Just talking to somebody this evening, we sometimes put ourselves under appalling pressure, because Jesus would love us not to worry, but we do. But it doesn't mean we're bad or we're trying to defy something. It means we start from there. That's the truth. And then you can let Jesus into that, because you're standing on a little stone that is true. You are worried this morning. You've got things on your mind. And if you let God in there, you do stand a chance. But if you beat yourself around, then, none of us, well, maybe, actually, Adrian, there might be a couple here who are just like that couple.
Oh, well, they might,
and do consider all things
pure
joy.
We do apologise to those who've actually sorted it all out. We nearly didn't join our church, our current church. We love the people in our church. But when we first went there, in the very first service we were at, the leader said, now somebody, can't remember the name, doesn't matter, is going to come and just tell us something the Lord has been giving to her this week.
Which is fine. No,
Which is
lovely.
fine, yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. So she came up and she said, in a very solemn voice, the Lord has been telling me that we should not worry. This is not a suggestion, it is a command. And she sat down. So, of course, the entire church was congealed with horror, because we all know we worry, and we all know you can't switch off worry like you switch off a tap. What you can do is be loving and friendly to each other to help in sorting out the things that are causing worry. And sometimes, marvelously, and often unexpectedly, the Holy Spirit, which is the working power of God in the world, will do something really wonderful. And I don't think that happens quite as often as we perhaps say it does sometimes, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I don't know why we're throwing these things out, really, except that we know that in all churches we can put ourselves under stress And the danger of that is you then kind of start believing that maybe God is calling you to do some quite extraordinary thing that you're not quite doing. Yes, I have a special guest here. And just before I talk to him, I just want to tell you a tiny bit about him. In fact, I'm going to read something that is in one of our top Christian magazines. It's all about a ministry organised by somebody called Dave and Sheena. And the really good news is we've got Dave here tonight, which is very, very exciting.
Hi, everybody.
But I'm
Dave.
just going to read this little tiny bit from
Great
this
to be here.
magazine. Trembling with fear, the elderly lady gripped the trapeze bar with whitened knuckles. Glancing down at the sawdust floor below, the tiny platform on which she balanced, she silently asked herself why, at the age of 83, she was about to leap into space. Moistening dry lips with the tip of her tongue, she recalled advice from Dave and Sheena. Don't look down. Concentrate on what's happening up here and remember that God created gravity as well as everything else. Well, I could read a lot more about this from this article, but I don't have to because actually I have got Dave Bolden.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave.
Right.
Hello. Hi.
Okay. Well, I was going to start by asking you, when did you first realise, Dave, that God was calling you into this very special and wonderful ministry?
The trapeze work.
The trapeze ministry.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'd like to witness to that.
Good.
I really would.
Good. Perhaps
Yeah.
you'd like to tell everybody.
Well, I fought against it for a while, but after
Okay.
I had a couple of falls, and you'll understand this. I had a couple of falls from 100 feet without a safety net.
Right.
And I realized the Lord was trying to say something. And I began to think very seriously about the direction in which I was going.
Oh. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, what about, can you give us some examples of the spiritual support that you discovered for this ministry?
In Scripture, you mean?
Yes, scriptural support.
Hey, look, you can prove anything you like through Scripture, can't you?
Okay.
If you just, move it around the way you want to. I have to say, though, that my own reading of Acts, the book of Acts, suggests that possibly Peter and certainly Paul the Apostle were actually fine performers on the flying trapeze in their own right. In fact, I'd say that aerial acrobatics was part of everyday life in the early church. Wow. My wife and I just wanted to, bring it back to the church.
Hey, and have you discovered any special problems with this ministry?
There's so many miracles. There were
that's wonderful.
So many miracles. I remember we had to get hold of a big top.
Okay.
To perform all the stuff we were going to do. And I was literally led step by step by God. I bought a magazine called Big Tops for Sale.
Wow.
Just casually, not for any realizing anything about it. And I was flicking through it one day when I came across an advert that seemed to almost leap off the page and hit me in the eyes.
What did it say?
It said Big Tops for Sale.
Oh.
And there was a number to ring. And when I dialed the number, I could hardly believe what was happening there. This man had a big top
Oh, my
for
goodness.
sale. And I rang my friends around to ask for advice, and they all said, why don't you ask him if you give him some money for it, if he would give you the big top.
And?
I did it. And the man agreed. He agreed on the spot. And the amazing thing was that after borrowing some more money to add to the amount we thought we'd need, we had exactly the right amount.
Oh, goodness me.
To the penny. My wife was so excited. She was so excited that she leapt up on my shoulders and she did a triple back somersault with pike and triple twist.
Oh, my goodness.
Into my paternal grandfather, who was staying at the time. And we laughed, we did laugh. Yes. But he wasn't a Christian at the time, okay.
Have some people found it more difficult than others to grasp this new wonderful thing? I gather you do have a few problems with just a few people.
Yeah, we do. I'm afraid that the elderly infirm been really sluggish in their response to the new aerial thing in the church. And so have partially sighted and blind folk are very slow at coming forward. I mean, it's a matter of trust, isn't it? Isn't it, friends? It's a matter of trust. The world says it makes no sense to step into space 100 feet above the ground when you're blind and have no experience of trapeze work. Yeah. But we're not of the world, are we?
No.
We're not of the world. We are of a different race, and we ought to be different.
Well, I think that we will cut this interview short now, David, and thank you very, very much for joining us.
Oh,
it's been quite amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. And I do hope you'll have a go, especially you older folk, feeling a bit nervous.
I know it's crazy and silly and all that. But I was thinking, even as we were doing this very silly thing, at the moment we're beginning to talk about Jesus, about God, about the Holy Spirit, somehow in a way that we don't understand, allowing Jesus to come down and be among us. And a while ago, I was thinking about the narrow way. And we talk about this tightrope and how silly it is and being up there. But it seemed to me that the narrowest way of all is the tightrope. And Jesus walked it. And if you think about walking a tightrope, the only way you can get balance is by having your arms stretched out. And that was the narrow way of Jesus. It wasn't to condemn, it was to save. And he did it by walking the narrowest of ways, the tightrope, but with his arms stretched as wide as he could. So daft as it was, there are some things about it, aren't there, that have a little truth in there, really.
Yeah, I think it's when you get disappointed with faith and what happens in your Christian life. And I know some people will say, well, that's not my experience. God has been consistent all through my Christian life. And I would say he has in mind, but there have been times when I cannot understand what on earth is going on. And the logic defies me. I just cannot think. But I also have to say that I have enjoyed it so much. But particularly since I realized that I can tell the truth. We really need people in the church who will not aggressively, but assertively say, this is what I feel about it. This is what's happened to me. This is what I hope for. This is something that burns in me. Our oldest son, who isn't a Christian, asked us recently, why do you go on with this? Why does it mean so much to you? Because he's a great guy, he loves us and we love him. But he wanted to know, why you go on about it all the time? And when it's someone you love and who's close to you, it's quite difficult to be honest, isn't it? You have to dig into yourself, and we dug and dug and dug. And what I dug and found, I think yours was the same really, wasn't it? Was to say to him, Matt, it burns in me. It burns in me. I couldn't throw it away if I wanted to. And my belief in that burning in me has leapfrogged the problems and the things that used to make me feel I couldn't carry on, because I've grown to love him. And that's a completely different thing. But I think to do that, you need to be telling the truth to yourself. And not to everybody else, because they'll get so bored with you, but to those you trust, and say, just be able to say, this is how I feel, this is what's happening to me. It's really good for us to do that.
I'm sure many of you have heard of John Wimber and the extraordinary healing ministry that he had, and it was absolutely genuine and real. I don't know if all of you will have ever heard of him saying something much more recently. He said, what I want more than anything, and this is obviously more than being anointed by God to have a healing ministry. He said, I want to be small change in God's pocket to spend. And that keeps with me. And I've got a verse here. And I've seen people who know Scargill well. When we were there at the very beginning, we put together a sort of a poemy thing. and it was blessed are. And there's one little verse that I think still applies, and it's why God needs us to be small change in his pocket. And it's this. You know, the Beatitudes, which we put inverted commas around and turn them into something very neat. It was Jesus saying, "You're it," to the people on that hill. Blessed are the lost, the bossed about, tired, fired, wild and wired, bullied, disappointed, uninspired. And blessed is the child inside, lying low, but still wide-eyed and ready for a fairground ride with Jesus. And I don't know about you, I'm getting some wonderful feelings of this church and of a lot of the things you're doing. There's a lot of people who are feeling like that, confused and disappointed by life, and the worst of all, having lost hope. So being small change in God's pocket, rather than being perfect and having, these things, pure joy all the time, or saying we never worry, but saying I'd like to be small change.
There's a lot of great stuff going on in the church here. We haven't been here for long enough to hear all about it, but we are very impressed. And it's not joyously triumphant. It's not fake good things. It's real things, and it's done by people who know they're flawed, as we do and you do. And it's very exciting when it happens. We have had some good things happen, haven't we, in the church?
Yes, yeah. Of course, but challenges. I don't know if anybody else was really moved by children in need, if you saw any of it. There was a girl called Emily trying to walk. The most enormous difficulty. On paper, it wouldn't have looked difficult, but in reality, it really was. And that was ever thus, wasn't it? There were challenges that really challenged.
Yeah, I think we'll move over that.
Oh, okay.
All
right. Sorry.
Well, I'm thinking about the time. How's the
No,
time going?
it's fine. I've no idea.
How's the time going?
The clock is also in a bag. So we usually have a clock just here. If you can wave at us when you think we've done about half, that would be very helpful, Richard. Okay, we'll move on from that then, about some of the good things.
Just quickly,
then.
one or two things that have happened in the church over the last 30 or 40 years are really good. And one of them is the move towards unity. And you have people getting together an awful lot now in a way they didn't used to. It fades a bit at times and then rises again. But it's a great thing.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's great.
You're an amazing leader of a church.
Now we know. Yes,
I've never seen anyone move with such determination and skill and specific intention. I thank you. God bless you.
No, this is
it's only a clock,
a really good thing, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And something else that is interesting with the stuff we do is because we're always doing funny stuff, sometimes you really worry about how people are going to react to it. And one of those things was at an Elim conference where I wanted to do something about speaking in tongues, which of course is a very large part of the Elim world. And this was some time ago, and I thought, are they going to find it funny, or are they going to be angry with me? Now, I don't know if you speak in tongues. It's one of the spiritual gifts. I speak in tongues, and I think it's a wonderful gift. And, of course, if you don't speak in tongues, you go to hell. No, you don't. They changed the rules in 1974. No, but being at the Elim conference, I thought, what will they say? What will they do? So I said to them, I've got good news for you. All these people sitting there, you don't know how scary this is when you're speaking to groups who have a particular view of things. I said, I bet there are some here who don't speak in tongues. And of course, nobody reacted to that. So I said, just to be helpful to you, I've printed out something that you can use when you're in your Christian groups that will help people to think you speak in tongues when you don't, actually. So all you've got to do is sit there and just read it quietly, and they'll think you're a spiritual giant. So at this point, I thought I'd like to go home now.
So did I.
But so I said, and the great thing about it is, for those of you who are interested in cricket, England must have won this match against New Zealand. Those who totally not interested. I said, the great thing is that this thing I gave them is a list of the mid-90s Sri Lankan cricket team. And it's remarkably helpful. And so I read it, and this is the point at which I really want to say to Bridget, get in the car, turn the key, get ready to go. So this was the Sri Lankan cricket team. Mahabanata Patu Sanath Jaya Surya Hashan Tilakaratne Suresh Pereira Aravinda De Silva Ramesh Kalawitarana Pramodya Wikarama Singha Mutara Mura Litaran Ramara Dharmasena Atuna Ranatanga Mahela Jaywadena. It's very impressive, isn't it? Really impressive. And when you have a group that don't laugh at things normally, what you hope for in your heart of hearts is that there will be one person there who laughs. It's all you need. It's all you need. Unfortunately, whether God inspired them or whether they just laughed, I don't know, but somebody laughed, and it spread around, and it was wonderful. It was really good.
It was wonderful, because it's not knocking speaking in tongues, it's not knocking the gifts that the Holy Spirit gives us, but it's just putting a little question mark into the obsession with your particular style that you happen to be in church. We were in Northern Ireland once, and it was just very briefly, it was Sunday. And in the morning, we went to a service, and it was very, very Protestant. It was so stern, and everybody was suited and booted, and we went to this prayer meeting before the service, and they prayed like that, but they prayed with passion. You know, they were really worried about a family that had moved into the town and were not being treated well. So even though it was so formal, it was real. And then in the evening, we went to an Elim church, and they were boinging about like Zebedee, and it was wonderful as well, because the gates were open, the doors were open at the back of the church, and people were wandering in from the street and were welcomed however they were and whoever they were. They were both lovely. They would have both pleased God, because the heart of it was real. So sometimes we worry such a lot about the way we do things and whether we're doing things right. And certainly, I don't know if anybody else went through the sort of 80s where you're wondering whether you should have your hands in the air or not, or, you know, the idea in the church we were in that you might kneel down was an absurdity. You know, you would never do that. There were so many new rules. Yeah, but those are some of the good things.
Have you got the John 3:16 phone?
I have.
One of the only verses that everybody knows, now I'm sorry, that probably there'll be someone who doesn't know it now, and they'll feel, why don't I know it? Is John 3:16. And the reason is that it's right at the centre of everything we think and believe. And it begins, God so loved the world that he gave his only beloved Son so that we wouldn't perish and we would have everlasting life. Well, I don't know about you, but I've heard that verse read thousands of times. And I did appreciate it, but I don't think I ever really appreciated it till one day I listened to it. And I thought, Jesus could have given in to temptation. If that isn't so, then it's a nonsense. Every day of his life, for those 3 years of ministry, he would be challenged to do something that was sinful. He could have failed. And I began to even more deeply appreciate the amount of work that went into that, which is one of the reasons why I love communion, because in part of the liturgy, if you use liturgy, is Jesus saying, remember me, or to put it another way, please don't forget me. I did a lot. I really worked hard for you. When you take the bread and the wine, please don't forget me. Please don't. And this is something I wrote about that, which Bridget's going to read.
You so loved the world. Not the saved world, not the good world, not the bad world, definitely not the only sect that knows they're going to get into heaven, and absolutely not the only sect that will get into heaven by the excessive grace of yours truly. No, not the closed world, not the naked world, not the hungry world, not the planet of the fatties, no. The world you loved, just as it was, is still the world that you love, just as it is, just as we are. Sorry. Adrian, this is a nightmare. I'm so sorry, everybody. Just 1 second. Just as we are. Right, I'll just read that little bit again. I have got it all here. No, the world that you loved, just as it was, is still the world that you love. Just as it is, just as we are, it's me, just as I am. You so loved, thus revealing a sad lack of taste for one so creative, this vast collection of misshapen vegetables, including, incidentally, those among us who are deeply, deeply ashamed and should be, including also, for certain sure, those among us who are deeply, deeply ashamed and really should not be. So loved us, so love us, that you gave and continue to give whatever it takes to keep as many as possible trudging happily or muttering worriedly along with you towards forever. To be honest, at this point, understanding can grind to a creaky halt. But my heart does not do that. My heart continues to walk on like a rain-soaked Liverpool footballer, because I think I'm just beginning to get it now. We shall never walk alone. You loved the entire unredeemed world so much that you were crazy enough to risk your only beloved son. You risked him. Risked. I had not realized that. Forgive me. I realize it now. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Risked? The logic of it all is beyond me. I mean, it's so convoluted and difficult and hard to understand. But in my heart, I have an awareness of the risk that God took with Jesus in sending him. And Jesus is still coming out in the streets all the time through us. Incredible privilege to do that in order to bring it to other people. There's a one limerick I've written, which I don't think I've got with me.
I've got it here.
Oh, have you got it? Oh, that's very good. This is some angels talking about some questions from the angels to Jesus. What did you drop from the sky for? Who were you learning to fly for? Any traces of worth in those people on earth? Jesus smiled and said, they're to die for. And finally,
it's our biggest challenge of all. We talk about challenges. It's our biggest challenge of all, isn't it? To actually believe that it's not just the world, but it's each of us. Each of us. It's hugely difficult
to hold that in our hearts and our heads and our minds and all the rest of us, really.
Well, it is when everything goes completely haywire, like this evening. Isn't it?
Just say a big thank you to Richard, who rescued me.
Yes, thank you, Richard, for your amazing ministry to us this evening. So before we have a much-earned break, by you, I mean, it occurred to me that they had a choice. I mean, the Trinity, I don't know much about the Trinity, but they had a choice, Jesus coming or not. And if he hadn't come, he could have relaxed, had a nice time. That's what this is about. What a mountain climber this Jesus might have been, climbing through the shadows of the scariest ravine, coming through and resting where the air is cold and clean. What a mountain climber this Jesus might have been.
So why did he choose death on a hillside, agony under a merciless sky? He could have stayed home. He could have played with the thunder. Was I really the reason he decided to die? What a brilliant dancer this Jesus might have been, moving sweetly on the Galilean dancing scene, moving like a fire through the red and gold and green. What a brilliant dancer this Jesus might have been.
So why did he choose death on a hillside? Agony under a merciless sky. He could have stayed home. He could have played with the thunder. Was I really the reason he decided to die? What a leg spin bowler this Jesus might have been. A holy Roly Jenkins, none of you have heard of Roly Jenkins, have you? On some Jewish village green, curling like a snake and taking 5 for 17. What a leg spin bowler this Jesus might have been.
So why did he choose death on a hillside? An agony under a merciless sky when he could have stayed home. He could have played with the thunder. Was I really the reason he decided to die? What a loving father this Jesus might have been, walking by his lady with the children in between, something in his eyes that I have never seen. What a loving father this Jesus might have been.
It's good, wasn't it, that he didn't play with the thunder. Did what he was asked to do, which is wonderful. Just before we have a break, I'll give you something to think about. And it arose because we were on the Isle of Wight and a lady came up to me and said, "I don't read your books anymore." And I said, "Oh, is there a reason for that?" She said, "Yes, I read one of your books and I didn't like what you wrote in it. So since then I've thrown that one away and I don't read anymore." So I said, "Oh, what did I say?" She said it was about Jesus. It was really insulting. I said, "Oh." She said, "Yes, you said Jesus was the pits." I said, "Did I really say that?" And then I remembered. And I said, "I think you misread that, didn't you? What I actually wrote was, in the great motor race of life, Jesus is the pits. The place where you are quickly mended so you can go on, which is what fortunately happens to us."
Well, we're going to have a break now, and I hope you're impressed with our little dog down here.
Yes.
We think that what happens is she just thinks we're sitting at home rambling on, to be honest, like what we might do in an evening, because this is the 4th time we've had to have her with us, and the same thing happens as a bored. Oh no, they're going on and on and on. Anyway, she's been very good. Right.
Folks, I'm sure you know the drill. There is coffee and tea and hot chocolate, no gin, I'm afraid, in the cafe area. Nice biscuits, even some gluten-free ones. And we will do that until we've had enough, and then we'll come and have some more ramblings. There is, if Adrian and Bridget would just block their ears at this point, there is a strategically placed wicker basket just by the door. If you would like to bless them with your £20 notes, or your 50p's, depending on what you think they're worth, to be quite honest, then we'll be able to give them a sort of slightly unctuous Christian gift at some point before they go home. Thank you very much. Go on, off you go.
You felt absolutely knackered, and then suddenly you look back. There was a reason.
I know. Absolutely. I know. Adrian, hello.
Hi, Adrian. Pleased to meet you. Hiya, hi, sweetheart.
Hello.
This. Do you happen to have another one of those?
No, we've only got the one. And we can't get any more at the moment. It's really difficult getting some books, I'm afraid.
Some of my books are
when it happened. And we'll do it just finish tomorrow, Adrian. So finish with Graveyard. Is that all right? Just check you've got everything, Adrian. I know. If they're here.
What?
Sorry, they're here. We could do beams. Well, I know you don't like it all that much, but it's very potent.
Is it the one with the right thing?
Yeah, well, you see if you can find it. You're A, I'm B, and then you're Martin. And I'm Mildred. Oh my God. Well, it was the worst. I can't think of anything worse than losing Richard's keys. Adrian, I tried to open the door of the car, and of course the alarm went off on the car. Well, because I didn't have the keys, and I thought maybe I can open the door from inside because the window's open. So I fiddled around with the lock, and the
Did it go off?
I think it went off. Yeah. So what do you think?
Does it actually work with this?
You know it does. You're A, I'm B, and then when you come, then you come on as Martin. So I say, not as far as him. Oh, Martin, fancy seeing you. Glad you made it late. You've been up holding your own prayer, and you're Martin.
Yeah.
And then when it goes through to Mildred Smith, Mildred, well, I've just come from the hospital. I know I saw you there. I visit her on Wednesdays, but if we're lining up for prayer, there's something from you. We'll do it with a bit of a voice on Martin and on Mildred, it'll be fine. And then when it happened, that's what did the fun stuff, I think. We've already talked quite a lot. I just, so it's been really good. I don't mean a problem,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
I didn't mean it's a problem. I just meant, I think we want to make sure it's not too long. It's not like it's not very loud, right?
City of Gold, brother. I play that kind of.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's one of my
isn't it?
favourites.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
We were going to, the people who organised it, were going to put a meeting on this autumn.
That would be amazing.
It would, wouldn't it? You never know, it might stop. I don't know quite.
One glass of water from Richard. So it's been.
I'll just have a sip of it.
I was going to say, would you like one in
No,
your
no,
own
yes,
glass?
I'm
Yes, well,
some truth in that, but only a bit.
There is, but not so I feel the factors, you know. And we just aren't compromising what's needed, and I don't think
Oh no!
chocolate seed. Oh, Adrian, you missed a trick there.
I mean, you couldn't make it up.
No, you don't need to make it up. I mean,
Spirit of chocolate.
chocolate seeds.
Oh, dear me. Of course it needs to be said.
Yes, please.
Oh yes, that would really help me. So what's the possibility of dropping these?
You admit that's it. You come back in.
There we go. That's better.
Next week, you come back in and have this.
You know, people who are really old and a bit deaf.
Yeah, Adrian, you're going to speak up. Aren't you, darling?
Let's speak up.
I mean, it's good.
Okay.
It's just my
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. I've got 4 years to go.
Not again. You silly dog. That's all right. Oh, she's from Berkshire. There you go. Come on, please sit into your bed. She's 4. She's fine. She'll be fine again once we start again.
Just over.
Come on, please sit in your bed.
Yes, you've said that. But it's just really, really How are we doing?
Hello again.
Right. Okay. Well, one or two people have asked me if I can lift my voice more. So I'm going to do that, but I'll probably sound a lot more Anglican if I do. I will try not to. We've been talking about the truth, and obviously it's important to us. Sometimes, though, we just get too challenged, don't we, by that? One of Bridget's favourite stories is one where a lady came up to ask me to sign a book, and I knew her like you know your sister, and the name had gone, and she was with her friends, and she said, "Adrian, would you mind signing my book?" And I thought, oh no, I can't remember her name. And I thought, shall I tell the truth, or shall I try to be clever? Sadly, I tried to be clever. I said, yes, of course I'll sign your book. Just remind me, though, because I don't think you ever told me how you spell your first name. She said, oh, I'll tell you, shall I? It's P-A-M.
You see why that's one of my favourite stories,
It's
can't you? I
just-
never get tired of hearing it.
It's just the pits. It's the pits. And she obviously has sussed me very early on. Yes. Anyway, so we Christians do pursue the truth as far as we can, but occasionally we get a bit lost. When we try to say, or try to be truthful, and it all goes wrong, it can go very badly wrong.
Adrian, I cannot stop thinking about that fantastic verse in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Got John 8:32.
Oh,
Do you know
yeah.
the one I mean?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
that's
that's
great.
well, that's one of my,
Adrian,
really.
that's marvellous.
Oh, it's one of
really,
my-
really good.
No,
Do you know, I don't think I even realised you knew it.
No. Well,
So, what is it that's special to you about that verse?
I suppose it's the way in which God, He speaks, using the words that are embedded. They are embedded within the verse.
Adrian, that's exactly what I think. So, what do you think he's saying to you?
What he's saying, no, he's conveying.
Okay.
He's conveying the centre
Uh-huh.
of the middle of the absolute heart of the message that is contained within that incredible verse.
Which is what?
Sorry, what is?
I'm
what-
sorry.
what-
I mean, what is the centre of the message?
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand what you mean. Right, sorry, I see what you mean now. Well,
Yeah.
the centre of the message.
Uh-huh.
It's so simple.
Good.
It's so very simple.
Uh-huh.
Like so many things that seem complicated. It's very, very simple.
Okay.
The centre of the message is basically
Yes.
that all of us, every single
Okay.
one of us, no exceptions,
Okay.
we all
Uh-huh.
should.
Should what?
Take it on board.
Take what on board?
The message.
Which is what?
It's just occurred to me that different Bible translations vary enormously, don't they? I mean, what's the actual wording in your translation of that
Yeah, I mean,
wonderful
what's the
verse?
exact wording in your translation?
Oh, no, you're getting so much trouble when you don't tell the truth.
Oh, well, yours must be a very modern version then, Adrian, because my version says, Jesus says the truth will set you free.
Ah, do you know, I think he could be right about that.
It's silly. Oh, it is so silly, though, isn't it, sometimes? We try too hard, and then we get ourselves all tangled up. And there are always going to be people who know exactly the Bible verse and exactly where it comes. They're those people. And maybe they're us sometimes, I don't know. Where are we going to go?
When my mother died, I loved my mother, and we both loved my mother. I think she was Bridget's best friend, really, wasn't she, for a long time. And she had qualities of absorbance. She She was someone who anyone could go and say anything to. But if you'd done something disgusting, I think she'd be the person you would tell if you thought you needed to tell one person. It would be her. She was a remarkable character. And when she died, it was an enormous shock. And I had an experience at that time that has never left me, and I wrote it in a very short poem, which I'll read to you. On the day my mother died, I huddled by a lake and swore. You should have seen that word go spinning like a flat white stone across the surface of the water. God caught it on the other side. He walked round the lake and placed it in my hand. You can have this back, he said. I'll keep the pain. And then he smiled and sat just beside me for a while.
You know, we forget, don't we, that Jesus tells us to go into our room and close the door and talk to our Father. He knows anyway. Grief is a terrible thing. We're all in a muddle today, one way or another, because of the vote, and we're not talking about that at all. I'm sure there's lots of different views, even in this one room. But just allowed every day, as many times as we want, to go into a secret place, not actually a place, but a place within you, and talk to your Father. And your Father, who knows what's done in secret, who knows what you're really thinking. So that little poem is a very good example of being able to take the rawness of the way that you're feeling and take it to the place you're supposed to take it, and not bottle it all up and try and be more than you are. We talked a little bit, have I got time, just to talk about the way of grace. You know, this amazing thing we talk about, the undeserved kindness of God. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the morning. But Adrian came up with a sort of metaphor, I suppose, that helped me a lot. And he talked about the way of grace being between the rock of the law, which is impassable. It's right, but it's impassable. Impossible and impassable. But then the other side of that is the swamp of license, where anything goes. And we try to accept all things, and we can fall into this sort of swamp of license. Do you know what I mean? It's where you can't get back from it because you've agreed with absolutely everything. One of the places that we learned something about this way of grace was we've been ever so fortunate over the years to work alongside a couple of really wonderful charities, and one of them is World Vision. And we were in Zambia, and it was at the time of the AIDS crisis in Zambia. But these things pass, don't they? We don't forget it. We don't talk about that anymore. But it was a massive thing at the time. And when we were there, it was just decimating the population of Zambia and Africa. It was as though the fabric of the country had been just torn. You had grandparents and you had children, but the adults were dying all over the place. And a lot of children ended up on the streets. And for a lot of girls ending up on the streets, there was only really one career open to them, I'm afraid, and that was to become sex workers. And we knew that World Vision was trying to meet these girls, young women, teenagers, a lot of them, sort of middle teens, but they didn't know really how to do it, because these girls were already feeling deeply ashamed of themselves, but just surviving day by day. Well, we knew we were going to meet these girls, and anybody who's ever done anything with an organisation knows you never really know where you're going and quite what's going to happen on the way. Anyway, we're walking along with this person who's taking us to meet a group of sex workers. We had no idea what we were going to say, but that's part of the story always. But we saw this game of football going on. Now, we're so used to women's football now, it's completely wonderful and normal, but then it wasn't, you know. And these were these two teams of women footballers, and they were dressed fully, great kit they were wearing, and they were playing very competitively. And the person leading us said, we're just going to go and have a word with them. And I thought we were going to, you say it sometimes felt like the Duke of Edinburgh. You go to these situations, you sort of say, jolly good to see you, you know, no idea. But actually, what we didn't realise was that these were the young sex workers, that the people working with them had thought, how can we reach them? They're so far away. What we need to do is affirm them, make them feel loved and special and good about something. And it worked. One by one, these girls were coming and saying, I can't climb into any more lorries. I can't do this anymore. I want to feel like I feel when I'm playing football. I want to feel clean and good and okay. And at that point, they were able to go on to a program called Sanduka, which meant deep change, and it was spiritual and psychological. And we met one girl, the most lovely girl, who was a sex worker because her brother, she was trying to look after her little brother. They'd both been thrown onto the streets. And she said to you, didn't she? She said, I can never go back because I can't go back to the church because I've been so bad and because God won't want me back. And it was like the opposite to everything that we know.
Opposite of the gospel. It's turned completely upside down. Who's teaching this rubbish in Africa? I mean, there's some wonderful things going on in Africa, but for this girl who struggled to help her brother to survive is too frightened of God to go back and see him. It's so sad. So sad.
And that's our challenge, isn't it, all the time? To walk the way of grace with people. And as I say, things we've already heard about your church. We know that there are lots of things going on. But as an individual, to walk that way of grace between the rock of the law, where you know you're in the right, and the swamp of license where everything goes, it's difficult. But that is that tightrope walk of Jesus, isn't it?
There's a verse in the New Testament that I always get it wrong when I quote it. How does it go about the Holy Spirit? He bloweth where he listeth. Is that what he does?
It's your translation.
No, it's not a translation. I think those were the words. I think it means he does what he wants, when he wants, how he wants. That's what it means. But I guess most people here would say, I don't want to be in the stiff, religious, uptight world of church. But we have our own rigidity in all groups. And we have to remove that and just see that God does things in ways we would never imagine. And it's interesting that we have the dog here. We have 4 wonderful children.
Somebody very close to us.
Or someone very close to us, and has had very serious mental illness problems. And he's lived with us for some time. Obviously, almost every day we would say to God, what can we do about this person? What will happen? What will change him? And your mind moves to kind of religious type things. Do you know what really made, apart from the fact we did hang on to him, that was a very important thing, but the thing that really changed him was this dog and our grandson. Why? Because when they met him, they overwhelmed him with love. They ran all over him. They thought he was wonderful.
Going back to the way of grace, they affirmed him. They respected him. You know, they made him feel good, which is exactly the same as the situation in Zambia, isn't it? The same thing.
They were thwarted by love.
He was.
A lot of people are. Because so many people think they're rubbish, there comes a moment where you think, nobody loves me, nobody really cares about me, and they'd care even less if they knew me inside. But when love comes, it thwarts you. It says, hard luck. And what God says with his absolutely merciless mercy is, I'm never giving up. I am never giving up. I'm going to love you, and one day these sleeping beauty thorns that surround you are going to go, and you are going to know you're loved, and you're going to be okay. But it can take a lifetime, or a dog, or a grandson, or something you never ever dreamed of.
Where are we going, Adrian? I'm very conscious of time.
Well,
What should we talk
yeah, we
about?
haven't got much time. One thing that I thought would be interesting to read. So we were praying with a lady one day, and if ever there was someone who thought she was pretty worthless, it was her. Her childhood had been awful. It had been saturated with religion, and she'd been very badly treated. In fact, she said she really felt like a rescue dog. And after we talked to her for a while, I wrote this for her. And whether anyone here identifies with this, I don't know, but I'll read it to you. It's just called Rescue Dogs. Some of us are rescue dogs, beaten and mistreated once upon a time. Food was an irregular surprise. Existing was the most pernicious crime. Some of us were caged for hours. We made no move, no noise, no fuss. We hoped that being good might stir the hearts of those who seemed to be in charge of us. Some of us were never taught a truth those shadow people did their best to hide. That there are times when freedom and obedience go racing through the summer meadows side by side. Some of us are not sure we are rescued. Bewilderment dies so hard and fades, but never quite departs. Flinching now, as we were taught to flinch through all those endless days, we wait for unaccustomed love to soothe and mend and grow our broken hearts. Some people come from a long way back, and are judged sometimes within the church because they've moved further than any of us have, or most of us have, but they started a long, long way back. And that procedure is a very difficult one.
And they can't listen. They can't, because there's so much going on all the time that it's like a barrier to anything God might be saying. Sometimes it's a bit more deliberate, and churches and individuals have run ahead of what God would like them to be doing. You know, God ends up in the role of sort of putting the chairs out sometimes, because all the meetings have happened and all the planning has happened, and although there's been a cursory little prayer, they haven't actually been open to really listening, and things can go quite badly wrong.
I want to tell you a story. Who was it we used to say that about? Max Bygraves, those who are ancient will remember. I'm going to tell you a story, yeah. Those people who come from a long way back, and those who have a long journey to make to reach the point where God wants them. This is a story this is a centipede story. Do you know this story? It's about a man who wanted a pet.
Very serious story.
It isn't. It's very serious. He wanted a pet that talks. So we went to the pet shop, and he said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I really want a new pet. But I would love it if he talked, or her, if she could talk." The man said, "Well, we don't have anything at the moment, I'm afraid." Then he said, "Hold on a minute, we do have one thing. There's a centipede, and you could tap him if you want. He does talk." The man said, "Oh, yeah, that would be fine." And he said, "Well, he's in there. He's in that box there. And there's a slot in the box." He said, "Be sensitive with him, because it takes him a while, to get round to talking." So he took the box home, and it was Friday. And he put the box on a table, and he went over and he looked through the slot in the table, and he said, "Centipede, I go to church every Sunday. Do you want to come with me this Sunday?" Nothing. The next day, he tried again. He thought, "I've been a bit insensitive." He said, "Centipede, look, I love going to church. It's really important to me. Do you think you'd like to come with me on Sunday?" Nothing. And again on Saturday evening, nothing. Finally, Sunday morning, just before he left for church, he said, "Centipede, I'd really love you to come to church with me. Tell me you'll come. And at last he spoke. And he said, I heard you the first time. I'm just putting my shoes on.
It's not Adrian's story, but
Not my story, no.
it somehow covers so many things, doesn't it? Some of us are still putting our shoes on. And sometimes we forget that. We can't understand why people haven't changed a bit more or sorted themselves out a bit more. And sometimes, as Adrian says, they're coming from a long, long way back.
Very briefly, we met a lady in a Bible study group that we were taking for a short time. And one day, she was in her late 60s, which to us now seems young. She suddenly said, I am a vengeful woman. And it's great when people say that, isn't it? It's quite juicy, isn't it? You know, what are you going to hear now? And so we said, oh, what do you mean by that? She said, all my life, I've said, if someone hurts me, I hurt them. If they do something to me, I do something back at them. No one hurts me and gets away with it. And she said, just this week, she said, I've heard the Lord's Prayer thousands of times. I go to church every Sunday, and I hear the Lord's Prayer. The first time in all that time that I've noticed what Jesus said about forgiving, I've just seen it. And I never saw it before. We all know it. We forgive those who sin against us. No, please forgive us as we forgive those who sin against us. A strange prayer to tie yourself in like that. But what it's about is that it's crucially important. And in a church like this or any other church, if you have something against someone, sort it. It's not easy. It is not easy. But your absolute responsibility is to go to God and say, I won't make up a name in case it's a real one. I hate Veronica. No, right, good. I hate Veronica, and I hope she dies or something. And God will say, thank you, at last. You've laid it out for me. Right. Where do we go from here? And he's very good at taking you step by step, eventually, to a place where you can begin to truly forgive. But the crucial thing is to tell him the truth. And maybe tell someone else the truth. And then work through from there.
And allow that it can take a long time, some of these things. I'm just going to tell you something that happened when our eldest son, was just about 2.5. And we had stayed with a couple who, there were two things not in their favour of taking a very lively 2.5-year-old, right? One of them was they had no children, and the other was that they had an impeccable house, right? So a weekend had proved to be quite a challenge. But at the end of it, I said to Matt, right, what I want you to do is I want you to go along and I want you to say thank you for having us, Auntie Margaret. See? Because that's what you do, isn't it, with your polite child. I thought maybe he'll redeem, maybe he'll get a few brownie points for this. So anyway, he was delightful. He went and he said, thank you very much, Auntie Margaret, for having us. And then without a breath, he said, there, that's got that done. But actually, that can happen with forgiveness, you know. We can kind of think, if I can just say it, I'll say something. I'm so sorry if it's your, you know, or I really want to forgive you for that, or whatever. It hasn't begun the process. It's a journey. Forgiveness is a journey, just as our spiritual growth is a journey. You can't just, there, that's got that done, and hope it's gone. Maybe it will have done. Because, as you said, God works in mysterious ways. The Spirit listeth wherever it bloweth, or whatever it was. But, yeah, it takes us time. We've got to be kind to ourselves. We've got to love others as we love ourselves. And we've got to love ourselves just a little bit more. Be a little kinder to ourselves.
Well, we haven't got much time left, judging by that clock that the vicar so kindly brought to the front.
Well, there are some people, aren't there, Adrian, who it's very difficult to forgive, who really get up our noses a bit.
Oh, we'll do that, and then we'll do something at the end, yes. Yeah, the great problem when someone really gets up your nose in the church, and you've got to live with them, haven't you? And you want to be loving and warm and all the rest of it, and there they are.
In the book, I know some of you will have known the sacred family of Adrian Plass for years. I've heard from one or two people that they have. It never was actually Adrian. Adrian's much more like Gerald, anyone who has read those original books. But that family has kind of stayed with us. And in Adrian Plass and the Church Weekend, Gerald, this flippant Gerald, has grown up. And he has actually become a vicar. And he has a church. And the idea behind the book, and to be honest, because we were on community at Scargill House, we know how church weekends work, it seemed like a good idea for it to be a church weekend away. And so the idea was that Adrian and Anne, his wife Anne in the book, are taking their church for a church weekend, and Gerald is taking his church, and they're going to join together for a church weekend. It's quite an experience for all of them, isn't it?
So Adrian is in charge of organising the weekend, so people will phone him to have their names put down to go on the weekend. And the person he finds most difficult in the church is a lady called Minnie Stamp, who really annoys him. So this is an extract from that, a bit of that from the book. I had a call from Minnie Stamp one evening informing me she is definitely coming on the weekend. Unfortunately, Minnie is a junior teacher who joined our church a few months ago. I know you're not supposed to notice these things, but she has a slight problem with pronouncing the letter R, especially to my fevered imagination when she says my name. The other thing that really annoys me, though, is that she reacts to anything I say as though I've come to her for counselling. Last year, for instance, I asked her if she had anything to contribute to the Harvest Festival entertainment that I was quite happily organising. She tilted her head to one side, crinkled her eyes in a caring, compassionate sort of way, and said,
"Oh, Adrian, does no one want to do your little supper thing?"
What? No, there isn't a problem, Minnie. I mean, quite a lot of people have actually signed up and it's going really well. It's not my thing, and it's not little, it's not actually mine. All I'm doing is trying to get...
It gives you an excuse to go round and speak to people, doesn't it, Adrian?
What kind of demented pixies does she teach, for goodness sake?
We all lovey-dove you, Adrian. God loves you through us. You do know that, don't you, Adrian? You're one of God's little sad elves, always working away really hard so that we notice you. Well, we do notice you, Adrian, and we lovey-dovey-dove you.
If she knew how close this little sad elf came to altering the shape of her face with the nearest blunt instrument, she would have been absolutely appalled. Anyway, on this particular evening, after I said hello on the phone, on that particular evening, she said,
"You sound all grumble chops, Adrian. Would it make your grumble chops day go all merry and bright if I told you I was coming on your churchy thing? Because I am."
I could hardly say, God, no. No, on the contrary, I wish we had a special anti-bursary fund for paying people like you to stay away. What I actually said was, "Oh, yeah, well, that's great, Minnie. Good, really good. I'll put you down on the list. You do really want to come, only I don't think we're going to have any trouble filling the list. So, you know, if you just..."
Mr. Adrian Plass, Esquire, Minnie says you're to march straight through to the bathroom and look at yourself in the mirror and say, "I am a fairy light on God's Christmas tree, and everybody loves my twinkle." You will do that, won't you, Adrian?
Actually, I don't think I will. Because
Promise.
Oh, all right. As I came out of the bathroom tonight and got into bed with my wife, I asked her a question. Anne, can I ask you something,
Of course
please?
you can.
Do you love my twinkle?
Yeah, it's not your best feature, my darling.
Sometimes there's just not enough vomit in the world, is there? The
Those
problem
are
with
the
these things
challenges,
is that they're real. And the other annoying thing is that the blessing and the curse for Christians is that every single person in the world is the most important person in the world. So it doesn't matter what you think about them, it doesn't matter what they've done to you, you can't change that often. You might eventually, but in the meantime, the Holy Spirit says, hard luck, tough, put it on the shelf and see what needs doing for that person. It is really, really hard. Sometimes God helps people to do things more easily, but mostly, I remember a man after a meeting say, I've been waiting 20 years for God to make me obedient. I said, I don't think you've quite grasped this, have you? The whole point is that you are obedient. You are the one who has to make the decision that you are going to try to do this. If you try, I'll give you a hand. But I'm not going to stand there doing it anyway.
You did have one occasion, didn't you? If we've got time for fudge, Adrian. You did have one occasion where you rather hoped God might do it for you, and he jolly well didn't.
Yeah,
This was somebody at Scargill, and I know one or two people who've been to Scargill might have heard this. But there was somebody there, and she'd been there for the weekend, and we hadn't had a chance to talk to her really. And she's somebody who struggles with some aspects of life. I mean, she finds some things really difficult, and one of the most important things in her life was her hamster. And we'd heard about the hamster before. Well, Adrian just had 10 minutes just before she was leaving. And you asked her, didn't you, how was she? And she said, well, I'm not great really, Adrian, because my hamster has died. And this was a huge thing for her. And we're talking about no unimportant people. Well, there she was, in front of Adrian. The most important thing to her was her hamster. I think you have got it. I'm sure you have. Just go back. Everything's falling off. Give it to me, I'll find it for you. It's not that end, is it? I'll find it. Well, you carry on talking and I'll find it.
I wanted to help, right? So I thought, what can I do? I mean, John 3:16 doesn't do much for dead hamsters, does it? So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll write a poem about your hamster before you go. And then you can put it on your wall if you want to and remember him. So I said, what happened with your hamster? She said, oh, well, his teeth went bad and they were very long, and someone said, you must take him to the vet. Thank you. So I did. And the vet looked at my hamster and he said, I'm afraid your hamster's very ill and he will have to die. And that was the end of my hamster. So I said, what was his name? And she said, oh, he was called Fudge, like many hamsters are, I think, for obvious reasons, the colour. So I sat at the table and I thought, I've just said I'm going to write a poem about a hamster in 10 minutes. And I said to God, can you write me a poem about a hamster called Fudge? And he said, you're the one who promised. You did. No, he didn't. I didn't have that conversation. But I thought, I've got to write this damn thing. Anyway, this is what I ended up with. So I want you to imagine me drawing down out of the universe every word that rhymes with fudge as I went along this. So this is the poem, The Death of Fudge, the hamster. Cleaning you and feeding you, it never was a drudge. Dear Fudge, your teeth got far too long and bad, and God gave us a nudge. Help, Fudge. We put you in a cardboard box. You didn't even budge. Poor Fudge. We gave you to the vet, but you never bore a grudge. Sweet Fudge. We dug a little hole and we buried you in sludge. Oh, Fudge. We stood beside your grave. It was a little muddy smudge. No fudge. Leaving you was horrible, a slow, unhappy trudge. Bye, Fudge. Hamster hell or heaven? Ah, who are we to judge?
Yeah, it's lovely. You know, it was just an example, really. Her, very important to her hamster, was honoured in that little poem. And she became the most important person in the world for a little while. Because what was important to her was seen as important to us. The challenges for us are huge. Because we're having to try to see with the eyes of Jesus. That's pretty difficult, really. But anyway.
So we'll finish quickly with something about heaven. Do you want to go to heaven? Yes? Yes? Yes. I'd like to go, but I have a few reservations. I think if I have to sing some of the choruses we sing for 10 billion years, I might get a little fed up. But I'm really looking forward to seeing my family again. I'm looking forward to meeting Jesus properly. I'm looking forward to understanding everything at last. But some people, what they want is to learn at last how to play. Some people have never really played. And getting to heaven, maybe you'll play at last. So this, our final thing, is called Playground. And we've been finishing with this for years. Oh God, I'm not anxious to snuff it. But when the grim reaper reaps me,
And me, we'll try to rely on our vision of Zion. We know how we'd like it to be.
as soon as you greet us in heaven and ask what we like, we shall say,
We just want a chance for our spirits to dance. We want to be able to play. So tell the angels to build a soft playground designed and equipped just for me.
and me, with a vertical slide that's abnormally wide and oceans of green PVC.
There'll be reinforced netting to climb on and a rubberized floor that will bend.
And no one can die, so we needn't be shy if we're tempted to land on a friend. We'll go mad in the soft, squashy mangle and balmy with balls in the swamp.
Coloured and spherical, we'll be hysterical. We'll have a heavenly romp.
There'll be cushions and punch bags and tyres in purple and yellow and red.
And a mushroomy thing that will suddenly sing if you kick it and land on its head. And there'll be fountains of squash and ribena to feed our continual thirst.
And none of that stuff about you've had enough. Surely heavenly bladders won't burst.
'Cause we might be too tall for the entrance.
Ah, yeah, but Lord, chuck the rules in the bin.
If we are too large, tell the angel in charge.
To let us bow down and come in. Thank you. Good night.
They said that's it. So,
That's it.
look, thank you, and especially for those who've travelled. Lovely to have you. The basket, don't forget, is still there. And if you haven't had enough, 11 o'clock tomorrow, all-age service, I'm doing the notices. And these guys are doing an all-age talk on possibly the passage I sent them and possibly a different one. We're going to find out. So you're all very welcome, whether you're a regular churchgoer or not. Thank you so much for coming. Safe journey. Look forward to seeing you again soon.